My name is Genevieve Zubrzitsky. I'm director of the Copernicus Program in Polish Studies and CREAS, the Center for Russian and Eastern European Studies. And today I have the pleasure to introduce our speaker, Magdalena Dębińska, who's Associate Professor of Political Science at the Université de Montréal. I must say I have really a distinct pleasure to introduce her and to meet her for the first time today because she lives in not quite my hometown because I'm from Quebec City, but while I was going to Poland to learn Polish and lived in Poland, she was at the same time moving to Montreal and living in France, so we kind of swapped lives. Professor Dębińska is Associate Professor at the University of Montreal in Political Science. She had a postdoc at McGill University before that. She completed her Master's in International Studies at the University of Warsaw, and she started her career in Latin American politics and then actually went back to the region to work on ethnopolitics more broadly. What she's presenting today is on the case of Silesia because I was really interested in that, but her most current research, and she's working on a book manuscript, is on Eurasia, the de facto states of Abkhazia, Transnistria, and also Turkish Cyprus. So we have students interested in the region. You'll have the opportunity to actually talk about her most current research on these places. She has received about every academic award, fellowship from both the Quebec, Canadian governments and from also Polish government. And today we're very pleased to have her to speak to us about what's going on in Silesia, in this movement, regional movement for autonomy, independence, identity politics. So thank you for coming, and we look forward to hearing more about Silesia.
Thank you very much, Genevieve, for this nice introduction. Thank you for having me, for inviting me, for insisting that I dig up my research on Silesia. As you mentioned, I was not looking into Silesia for a few years now because of my work on de facto states. But it is with a great pleasure that I come here to present Silesia to you. I know that there are some Silesians in the public, so it's a dangerous space I'm occupying here. But I hope that I won't make any obvious political mistakes. So the presentation is more broadly on European regions and more specifically on the ethnopolitical movement in Upper Silesia. The movement that is considered by the Polish states as being the only threat to the national interests and national security in Poland. So it's quite. This is stated white, black on white, white and black, in a document in 2001 document of the Ministry of Interior. So it is an interesting case, but I will start the presentation with a puzzle that is the transnationalization and Europeanization processes were supposed to resorb those national movements, and nationalism was going to be appeased with the transnational processes. And you have, in the 90s, you have quite a lot of writers, authors, researchers that were saying that, well, it's the end of history and the end of national movements, which obviously is not the case. Even recently, well, we have the Scottish referendum and the Catalonia referendum. So it seems that ethnopolitical movements remain strong and sound. Not only they remain strong and sound, but there is this specter of separatism, and some internauts have fun on the internet and are making those maps were pointing to the next possible potential ethnopolitical movements, separatist movements in Europe. So I put one of those maps, and as you can see, Silesia is pointed as being one of them, together with others. We can talk about that in Q&A questions if you wish. So all of those ethnopolitical movements that are looking for, that are claiming autonomy or claiming independence, are actually what we call stateless nations. These stateless nations are actually now represented, most of them are represented in the European Parliament. How and why? Because they joined the European Free Alliance, which is a political party that is represented in the European Parliament, which objective is to give political structures to all regionalisms and nationalisms in Europe. And their objective, their stated objective in their status, is that the putting together, or the objective is to have a Europe of regions and of peoples. What does it mean? It does not necessarily challenge the states, but they would like to have political structures that will be juxtaposed on the state structures, where some competencies, political competencies, economic competencies, cultural competencies, will be given to nations, so that there will be some jurisdictions that would be that would correspond to ethnic lines and ethnic boundaries, and at the same, that would be the Europe of peoples, and the Europe of regions is where historical regions would be given competencies through a process of decentralization. So this is what they aim at, and one of the movements that are part of this alliance and that are part of this political party that is represented in the European Parliament is the Ruch Autonomii Śląska, which means the Movement for the Autonomy of Silesia, who declared support for Catalonia and declared support for Scotia, etc., etc. So the case study I'm presenting here is like part of all these ethnopolitical movements in Europe. The particular case of Upper Silesia, which happened to be in Poland, in this southeastern part of Poland, encompassing parts of two voivodeships, Śląskie and Opolskie. So, who are Silesians and what do they want? What is interesting with Silesians in Poland is that they are not recognized by the state as being a distinct peoples. So when you have Armenians, Tatars, and Lemks that are Lemkos, yes, Lemkos that are recognized as being distinct people from the Polish majority, but Silesians are still not recognized as being distinct from the Polish nation. However, they claim a territorial autonomy on the territory they inhabit, and they claim the recognition of two things: of the Silesian language and of the Silesian nationality. The state opposes such a recognition, saying that, I'm still with the puzzle, so they are not recognized, they claim these things, and what is interesting is that since 1989, even if though they are not recognized, they are on the political agenda. They managed to be put on the political agenda both in Poland and on the European agenda. Not only their cause is put on the agenda, but they managed to form a regional, the coalition government in the region. Not only they did that, but they also managed to somehow have the numbers of self-identifying Silesians explode. They did explode, as you can see. by being the biggest national minority in Poland. When you compare the census of 2002 and 2011, well, I have the pointer here, and I have even, I have more than that. When you compare the numbers of the census 2002 and then 2011, there is this explosion of self-identifying Silesians. The explosion of Silesians and the biggest minority in Poland. As you can see, in the 2002 census, there was only one question and one possibility: what is your nationality? In the 2011 census, the question was put differently and allowed people to choose two different national ethnic attachments. So you could choose to be Silesian and Polish, Polish and Silesian, only Silesian, Polish and German, German and Silesian, etc., etc. And I will just point, maybe you're interested, I can also talk about the Kashups in Poland, which also, as you can see, the numbers exploded in a very short time. So how come? How come that we have so many self-identifying Silesians in Poland, and how come actually that there is an increase of the self-identifications? So what I will try to explore with you is these questions of why and how do Silesians entrepreneurs, ethnic entrepreneurs, manage to institutionalize the Silesian category on the European and Polish arenas, and what does actually the Silesian national identity mean to the categorized, so to the people on the ground, to the Silesians? And maybe you will be much more you will have a personal experience of that you can share with us afterwards. So what I'm going to argue is that actually these Silesian entrepreneurs, they are strategically adapting to the new and changing institutions, to the public space, in the public space, the discourses, and by doing so, they reinforce the boundaries of Silesianness. So actually the processes of democratization since 1989 and of transnationalization, Europeanization, offered an arena where to act, where to activate and revitalize the Silesian identification. So, but at the same time, these processes, even though there's a proliferation of ethnopolitical movements in Europe, but at the same time, these transnational processes make people acquiring multiple identifications, meaning that these new identifications or reinforced identifications, they are combined with other functional identifications. So there's some layers of identity that are important to take into account. So this is where I'm going. Very short history or very long history of Silesia, but it is important to understand the Silesian identity and how it is constructed, to have some idea of how it is formed. So one thing that is important is that Silesia is the so-called borderland, the sociological borderland, where actually the movement of borders, geopolitical borders, are quite important. Very quickly, the historical Silesia, Upper and Lower Silesia, were in Poland, then under the Czech crown, then Prussia, then Germany, and Poland, Germany, Poland. And these changes of borders change also the state politics towards this minority, towards these people. So you have Germanization, Polonization, and so forth and so on. What is important to note, because it will be used by the ethnopolitical movement of Silesians right now, is that between the two wars, the part of Upper Silesia being here, the part of Upper Silesia after the plebiscite and 3 insurrections, or or in Poland, is in Poland and is granted in the 1920 constitution is granted an autonomy status. So the Polish Upper Silesia between the two wars has an autonomy status in the Polish constitution, and here you can see in green. This is the territory of the autonomy in between wars within the borders of the present-day Śląskie voivodeship. So very quick lesson of history that we can go through in Q&A questions if you are interested afterwards. What is important to note also is the ethnic makeup of present-day Silesia. Most of present-day inhabitants of Górny Śląsk, of Upper Silesia, came to the region after the Second World War. Because after the Second World War, you had Germans were expelled from Poland, according to Potsdam agreements, but at the same time, repatriates from Kresy, from eastern parts of former Poland, were resettled to western parts of Poland, and so settled massively in the regions, western regions, and only in Upper Silesia alone, there was more or less 600,000 Polish expellees settled in the region, and only 800,000 Upper Silesians that remained in the region. Moreover, because Silesia was the industrial minor part of Poland, it was the Polish El Dorado, and there was the workers coming from all over Poland and settling down in Silesia. So we have this Upper Silesians that are actually not a majority in what they claim being the historical region. So the result is that Silesians, in general terms, don't identify as Polish, neither Germans, because there was this back and forth movement of borders, because they were influenced by three different cultures: Bohemian, German, Polish. Because they had always had a second-class status. Silesian could not be spoken in public spaces after the Second World War. There was criminal charges for that, etc. So actually, Silesians, the sociological research shows, have a certain resentment against both Poles and Germans. And at the same time, they have a strong attachment to their territory of origin, this Silesian, Upper Silesian territory, their history, their language, which is, I will talk about that more in length, and their culture. So they identify as distinct from Poles and Germans in general terms. So, as I mentioned in the beginning, what are their claims and stands, and what is the position of the Polish state? So, Silesian organizations, based on their claimed distinctiveness, I have to be very politically correct. So, based on this claimed distinctiveness, want to be recognized as a distinct nationality, having a distinct language, and having a territorial autonomy. The Polish state says Silesians are just part of the Polish nation. Their ethnologue is not a language; it's just a dialect of Polish language, and autonomy is necessarily associated with separatism. So, if we grant autonomy, well, we will have next. What we will have is referendum, as in Catalonia, and we will have the problem with territorial integrity. So, I will like to do two things in this presentation. On the one hand, to present to you how actually the Silesian movement institutionalize the Silesian category in the public space, how it is put on the political arena of the Polish and European political arenas, and how the elites, Silesian elites, activate identity attributes, and then I will go to present actually how Silesians self-identify and how they understand the meaning of Silesian category, what it is to be Silesian. So first of all started after the end of communism in 1989, when Polish state was renegotiating state-society relations, new constitution, new electoral laws, new everything. And this is the moment of opportunity for all interest groups, being that environmental groups, being other interest groups, and also minorities, to activate and to put their claims on the agenda. Well, this is the moment where we can actually push our claims and have a negotiation with the state. The most important organization in the beginning was it was the Związek Górnośląski, Upper Union of Upper Silesia, who was mostly interested in cultural claims. So it was only cultural claims, and that was okay with the Polish state. But a new organization was formed, the Ruch Autonomii Śląska, RAŚ, the Movement for the Autonomy of Silesia, which was much more better structured, but had political claims. And that was not so well seen by the state. The movement for the autonomy of Silesia is, as the title says, is for the autonomy of territorial autonomy from the beginning. But when the movement lost its power, lost its visibility, let's say, on the Polish agenda, strategically a new organization was formed by the elites from RAŚ, Gorzelik, Jerzy Gorzelik, and these things. And what is interesting is that since 1989, even though they are not recognized, they on the political agenda. They managed to be put on the political agenda, both Poland and European agenda. Not only are their cause is put on the agenda, but they managed to form a regional, the coalition government in the region. Not only they did that, but they also managed to somehow have numbers of self-defined Silesians explode. They explode, as you can see, by being the biggest national minority in Poland. When you compare this of 2002 and 2011, well, I have and I have even more than that. When you compare the numbers of the census to 2002 and then 2011, there is an explosion of identifying Silesians. Explosion of these Silesians and the biggest minority in Poland. I see that in the 2002 census, one possibility is your nationality. In the 2011 census, the question was put differently and allowed people to choose two different national ethnic attachments. To choose to be Silesian and Polish, and Silesian, Polish and German, German and etc., etc. And I would point, it may be interested, I can also talk about the cash in Poland, which also, as you see, the numbers exploded in a short time. So how come that we have any identifying Silesian in Poland, and how come actually that there is an increase of this self-identifications? So what I will try to explain with you is these questions of why and how do Silesian entrepreneurs manage to institutionalize this category on the European arenas, And what does actually Silesian national identity mean to the Qataris, so to the people on the ground, to the Silesians, and maybe be much more have a personal experience of we can share with us afterwards. So what I'm going to argue is that actually the Silesian entrepreneurs, they are strategically adapting to the new and changing institutions, public space courses, and doing so reinforce boundaries of Silesianness. So actually the process of democratization since 1989 of transnationalization and Europeanization offered an arena where to activate and revitalize the Silesian identification. So, but at the same time, these processes, though there's a proliferation of ethnopolitical movements in Europe, but at the same time, these transnational processes make people acquire multiple identifications, meaning that the new identifications or reinforced identifications, they are combined with other functional identifications. So there's layers of identity that we need to take into account. So this is where I'm going. Very short history, very long history of Silesia, but it is important to understand the Silesian identity and how it is constructed, to have some idea of how it is formed. So one that is important is that Silesia is the so-called borderland, the sociological borderland, where actual movement of borders, geopolitical borders, are quite important. Very the historical Silesia, our Silesia, Poland, then under the crown, then Russia, then Germany, and Poland, and these change borders. Also, the state politics towards these people have Germanization, German polonization, and so forth and so on. What is important to know, because it will be by the Ethnopolitical movement Silesians right now, is that between the two, the part of Upper Silesia being here, the part of Upper Silesia after the 2003 insurrection, or in Poland, and granted in the 1920 constitution is an autonomy. The Polish Silesia between the two wars has an autonomy status in the constitution. Here you can see in green. This is the territory of the autonomy in wars within borders of present-day voivodeship. So a very quick lesson of history that we can go through in Q&A question if you are interested afterwards. What is important to note also is the ethnic makeup of present-day Silesia. Most of present inhabitants of Górny Śląsk, of Silesia, into the region after the Second War. Because after the World War, you had Germans expelled from Poland, according to some agreements. The same time, retreats from Kresy, from east for Poland, resettled to western parts of Poland and settled massively in regions, and on Upper Silesia alone, there was more or less 600,000 Polish in the region, and only 800 Upper Silesians that remained in the region. Moreover, because Silesia was the industrial minor part of Poland, it was the Polish Rado, and there was a wars coming from all over the Poland and settling down Silesia. So we have this Upper Silesians that really not a minority in the what they being the historic region. So the result is that Silesians, in a very general terms, don't identify as Polish, neither Polish, neither Germans, because there was back and forth movement of borders, because they were influenced by different culture, Bohemian, German, Polish, because they had also had always had a second classes. Silesian could not be spoken in public space after the Second World War. There was criminal charge for that, etc. So actually, Silesians, the sociological research shows have a certain resentment against both Poles and and at the time they have an attachment to their territory of origin, this Silesian, Upper Silesian territory, the history, their language, which is I will about that more in more length, and their culture. So they identify as distinct from Poles and Germans, in all terms. So as I mentioned in the beginning, what are the aims and stands? What is the position of the Polish state? Silesian organizations based on their claimed distinctness. I be very politically correct. So based on this claimed distinctiveness to be recognized as a distinctionality, having a distinct language, and having an autonomy. The Polish says this was just part of the nation. Ethnolek is not language, is just a dialect of Polish language, and autonomy is necessarily associated with separatism. So if we autonomy, we will have what we will have is referendums in Catalonia. We will have the problem territorial integrity. So I would like to do things in this presentation. On the one hand, to present how actually the Silesian movement institutionalize the Silesian category in the public space, how it put on the political arena, the European political arena, and how elites, Silesian elites, activate identity acts, and then I will present actually how Silesians self-identify and how they understand the meaning of Silesian category, what to be Silesian. First of all started after the end of communism in 1989, when the state was renegotiating society relation, new constitution, new electoral laws, new everything. And this is the moment of opportunity for interest groups, being that environmental groups, being interest groups, and also minorities to activate and to put their things on the agenda. Well, it's the moment where we can actually push our claims and have a negotiation with the state. The first most important organization in the beginning was it was the Związek Śląski, Upper Silesia, who was most interested in cult claims. So it was cultural claims and okay with the Polish state. But a new organization was formed, the Ruch Autonomii Śląska, the movement for the autonomy of Silesia, with much more better structure, but had political claims. And that was not so well seen by the state. The movement for autonomy of Silesia is, as the title says, is for the autonomy from the beginning. But when the movement lost its visibility, let's say, on the Polish scene, strictly a new organization was formed by these from Gorzelik, Jerelik, and another that decided, and actually it was a young section of Rush that did it to move on and to put the new claim, the claims nation, saying that it's not only distinct from Polish and we need autonomy, but we need this autonomy because we are this nation. So Związek Ludności Śląskiej was formed in 1996. So the Union of People of Asian Nationality was formed in 1996. And status, it clearly states that what aim of this union is to push national consciousness of the people. Świadomość narodowa. This is literally stated in the statute. Obviously, they are still registered by the Polish state. Since 1996, they are courts. In courts, voivodeship, the state level jurisdictions. And why they're not recognized? Because there is this name nationality in the title and in the status. Well, state does not recognize that Silesian nation, so how we register a movement that pretends to one. Doing that would legitimize claims for nationality. So actually they will not recognize, but as even Rush leader Gorzelik said, the fact that they were in the with the struggle with Prudence gave them the necessary advertisement political space, so that it was used to advertise Silesia being an active actor on public space. So this, how they started to exist on the political in Poland. They also Europe. So if you read the web page of thing is refer European norms. This we are a style because this and that. We need autonomy. Why? Because actually in the decentralization processes that are necessary in the European. This is what European Union wants. They named the European Free Alliance in 2000. Have alliances. This is Jerzy Glik, the leader who is supporting this referendum. So what does it give to the use of Europe? Is this use, even if they're not recognized in Poland, they do have alliances outside Poland in Europe who pressure the Polish state to recognize Silesians. This is what we call the bang effect in social movements literature. So the external polena to pressure internal polena for their cause. So even though they are not recognized, do have public voice in Europe and also in Poland. But what is the crucial moment for the ethnopolitical movement in Asia is the 2005 law on minorities in Poland, national minorities and regional language language. Till 2005, it was sufficient for Silesians to say, well, see numbers of the 2002 census, we are the big minority in Poland, we have to be recognized because there's so many self-identified Silesians. Since 2005, it is not more possible to justify this for recognition on subjective self-identification because it is put law what you need to have to be recognized by the Polish state. There are so objective criteria for recognition. What are them? So, recognized as an ethnic minority in Poland, you have the group to reside on the Polish territory for at least 100 years, has to have distinct language and culture. To be recognized as a national minority, you have to have all these. Plus, you have to have a parent state. Parent states, so Armenians, for example, are recognized as being national minorities. There's Armenia. Tatar Poland are not as a national minority, but are recognized as being an ethnic minority because they don't have a state. Tatar start independence. And there is a category that was added in just in the versions of the law. This last regional group was added a category for troops, and that's another thing I can talk about later. What is important is that each category is granted different rights and resources. So national minorities have some electoral rights that are different, ethnic minorities and group, etc. Resources are the same. So it is important to be put in a category, and the best would be in a category of national minority. Okay. So who is on this? I won't mention everything, but there's 14 groups that are mentioned on the list of Polish minorities, which is important because it is the state of, and then whatever it actually does. If you're not on the list of minorities, you're subject to your own norms and laws. Okay, because this list went to Brussels, and this is those recognized by the state actually subject to European law. So Silesia is not on the list. Is on the list. Kashub's list, and this is a minority that was always considered. Well, they don't consider themselves a minority. It's important. The Kashub not recognized by the Polish state because it was considered as only a dialect of Polish language, and Kashub or Poles. So they were recognized until this 2000 law. They managed to get on the list in the category of regional language group. Okay. So Silesia went to and how come they are recognized and not? And when I read the very interesting, long discussions in the Commission on Minorities from the Polish Parliament, I found the verification. So justification is, well, the Kashub, they put with a language standardization. They have a Bible translated Kashub. They have literature, they have a dictionary, they have media in Kashub, and they even an editing program. So Silesians demand the reading of the law to be recognized as at least a regional group. They have to do something to adjust to the objective criteria of the law. So what do? Since since 2000, and I did do work to retrace the actual statements of Silesians associating the law with the activism, linguistic activism of Silesians. So because the Silesians never had a codification of their language, they have 30 different variations, ethnolike, etc., needed to deal with standardization. So we have now an alphabet. We have now dictionaries. We have now translated poetry and legends that orally transmitted before, and they're put in writing. Media, 2007 International ISO code, IS code, yes, from the Library of Congress. Washington DC was attributed to Silesian language, and there's Silesian Wikipedia. So now, in the 2008, one of the Silesian representatives during commission on minorities said, "What else do we do?" You have Samsung. You can have the Silesian language, Cartoon Net, po Śląsku, Jaskółka. This is the Rush Association Journal. And also there's a lot of really production literary Asian language. But there is recognized as distinct from the Polish nation. You have still to demonstrate it's not the language, still culture, and you have to have a culture. So actually, you see a proliferation of history writing of the Silesian, where the Silesians or the protagonist of history. So of the most referred to by Gorzelik books, Jerczyński History of the Nation, and I just put some myth, myth, not meaning that it is not true or true. It's just that it's the being the interpretation of history by the group itself. Okay, so Silesia was converted into Christianity 103 years before Poland. Golden Age is associated with 13th century, when there was the Silesian principalities, which are associated with the first political entities of Silesia. If decline and victimization is the insurrections, everything is fomented by the external actors, deportations, and there is this narrative of continuous fight for national liberalization. You have monuments, street names that are not officially put on because this is not in the law. They are not recognized, or they cannot officially have street names in Silesia. In Silesian, Kaszubs can, and if you go to Kaszubia, actually you have to in Polish and in Kaszubs names always. So they organize historical tours, so you can go through Silesia and discover the history of Silesian nation, monuments, commemorations, everything that needs to be done following the nation-building literature. So the argument is that were it not for the oppressors, the Upper Silesian Republic would now be well-developed, medium-sized European state with 5 million inhabitants. Okay, this is what. So, even though they are not recognized, the Silesian category is institutionalized, even if it is in an unofficial manner. They are actually partner in discussions. They are a public actor negotiating with the state, and the identity, the category is institutionalized also within the census, giving this category a life in itself. The recurrent object of discussions in the parliament, and as I said in the beginning, they also, Rush is actually always present in electoral, in elections, electoral campaigns, and electoral system in the region, and managed to be represented, and not only represented, but also within the regional governing coalition. So the category is institutionalized, even though not recognized. What about the real, what does it mean to be Silesian to Silesians? Is all this construction of Silesian identity as a nation, is it what is the response of the people in Silesia? What does it mean? So first of all, well, this is a pamphlet that, well, I did not translate. Some of you read Polish, but this is, okay, what distinguishes Silesians? The language, cuisine, traditions, but more the attachment to the region, history, and work ethics. This is what is put together. This is what distinguishes us. We are nearly, we are more than 800,000. We are very, very linked to mining industry, and the 4th of December is the big fiesta in Silesia because it's Barburka, is the St. Barbara's fed. We have an ISO code, very important. And how do we have to maintain the Silesianness? Well, we have to use the language. We have to declare that we are Silesians. We have to support organizations, and we have to know the Silesian history and all the past, etc. So, this is what is put forward by the elites. However, what we observe and what sociologists observe, that there is a transformed social context. So these Silesian identity attributes tend to be transformed and renegotiated by the self-identifying Silesians. So what is the context? The context, well, post-communist context is this great industrial area that is dismantled, that is restructuration, meaning that traditional Silesian workplaces are dismantled and Silesian sociocultural characteristics change. Unemployment, migration, mass culture, which provide the new impetus or to a transformed identity attribute. So very quickly, if the identity attributes that are linked to Silesian as family, religion, work ethic, and the language, the Silesian ethnolect, well, everything is losing a bit of traditional function because of this social transformed context, work ethic, religion, and Silesian. And actually, Silesian, what the research says that there is a Silesian virtual community. So you have on the internet, you have chats and blogs, etc. in Silesian. In different, it's not in the codified Silesian, but still you have the Silesian language that exists on the internet. But most of research on the ground remarks that Silesian ethnolect is a language of the heart, and it's people speak Silesian indeed, but in home, a neighborhood, but it is not used in a public space communication. Maybe because it's not recognized. That's another, of course, another story. But younger generation, a lot of young self-identifying Silesians, arguably 70% of them speak Silesian at home. But in social communication, they use Polish and now English, actually. Another interesting thing is that whereas self-identifying Silesians are very attached to the Silesian category, but not necessarily in terms of a nation. They are very attached to the territory, the location of the graves of their parents, grandparents, etc. is extremely important. But they would talk, in Ossowski's terms, they would talk about a small private homeland. So it's not like a homeland, national homeland, but small local private homeland. And while providing in the census, this is Nierakowski's research, when they provide this category of we are Silesians, it does not necessarily mean that this is Silesian, that they attach importance to Silesian nation or nationality, but this is their closest reference group. And which is important too, that most of those self-identifying Silesians also identifying as being Polish. So there's a hybrid identity, double identification, where Silesian is only one of the layers of the one of the dimension of individual identities. So nation, let's not exaggerate. However, what is also important to note is that that Silesian is a borderland identity. So the tożsamość pogranicza, which is associated, usually people just don't like to be asked which nationality they are, because they are indifferent to nationality, nation terms, because they were asked to be Germans and then Poles and Germans and Poles. Don't ask me, I have my small Heimat, the small private homeland. This is where I am from. I'm from Silesia, but nation, they are indifferent, and they don't like to be asked about that. And it is important, as Popielinski would say, it is important to understand that, because if you don't understand, within one family you can have different declarations of nationality. And this is because there is a loyalty conversion. Another layer is added on top of that identity layer. What we observe that there's European identification among Silesians, young Silesians. They would say, depending on the context, on the situation, because identity is situational, they would say, well, I'm Polish, I'm German less and less. This is something interesting too, because they identify less and less with German nationality, but it is Polish, Silesian, and European. So we have this European layer of identity that is added among young respondents. So I will conclude, so we can have some discussion. So I hope I convinced you that the category of Silesian is institutionalized, or is being institutionalized by the ethnic entrepreneurs in the public space, because they respond and adapt to the new institutional context, discourses, to the law, to the European norms. They need to be this, to respond to the objective criteria to be put on the list. So they are strategically adapting to this changing context of choice, which twists the literature, because actually, if one of the most famous, maybe the authors, Eric Hobsbawm, who said that globalization, transnationalization will resorb the national question. Well, the national question is not absorbed, but at the same time, we see that there is this common European layer of identity that is juxtaposing on other layers of identity. So Poles, you have young Polish nationals that will also declare that they are European. So you have Silesians and Europeans, and Polish and Europeans, etc. So at the same time, while this national category is officially institutionalized, at the same time, self-identifications do not necessarily follow that particular national category of Silesians, even though the Silesian identity is reinforced because it is present. It is a reference point that is more and more salient in the public sphere. It is not what Koskowska would say, or Hutchinson. It is occasional and fluctuating identification, and not an identity, national identity in itself, as yet, anyway. So The proliferation of ethnopolitical mobilizations is related to transnational processes, and but at the same time, these same processes blur the group boundaries. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
So we have about half an hour for questions. Do you want to handle the questions yourself, or
Yes,
should
it's
I
okay.
take a list?
It's okay, we'll handle. If it goes, you know, it's not under control.
Yeah, okay.
So, yes.
So are there Silesians to the west in Germany?
Mm-hmm.
Like the Basques, you know, in France?
In
Basques
other,
too. So
the
other-
Silesian diaspora.
Yeah, there are people
Mhm.
in Germany that identify with this movement.
In Germany, yes. In Germany, there are people.
They hang together and read
they
the
would.
books and get online.
Yes, the Silesian movement is having contacts with Silesians in Germany, and they seek their support. However, it is ambiguous, because the Silesians in Germany, they will also be supportive of the German minority in Poland, and so because they have this, they're German and Silesians, so it's not straightforward. And to my knowledge, there's no organization of Silesians in Germany. So there's no ethnopolitical movement of Silesians in Germany, etc. So, but there are some self-identifying Silesians that would be supportive of the movement. Yes?
There's another piece of this puzzle, in that Silesia also, under Austria, you had Chechen Silesia, Austrian Silesia,
Mm-hmm.
you know, that goes into the Czech Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, you know, historically it was part of Silesia. When it got broken up, there was still a distinct Chechen Silesian Polish contingent that was not Catholic. It was actually Lutheran.
Lutheran. Mm-hmm.
In that part of Silesia, Poles were Lutheran. So it complicates this picture a little bit more.
Yes.
It's a borderland.
Mm-hmm. So I agree totally that the history in one slide, it's a simplification, a gross simplification of what really happened, and the complexity of the story. As I put the Austria and Czechoslovakia here, but so there is this Śląsk-Cieszyński. Though for my argument, it's not necessary to go so deeply into the history. I don't have a book on that, so not yet. Thank you. In Śląsk-Cieszyński, there are some organizations, Silesian organizations, that are working together with Silesians, with Raś. So there is. I'm a not politician, a political scientist, and not a historian. So probably you have more to say about this particular period of Silesia than I have. But what I can say is that yes, there are some ethnopolitical organizations, Silesian, in Śląsk-Cieszyński, and they are working with the Silesians. In Poland. However, there you have the Moravian movement that is much more pronounced because it's bigger, and is represented too in the European Free Alliance, the Moravians or there too. Yes.
Yeah. It's a follow-up question to Mauritius and Marianne. So, is the codification of the language the same in the German Silesian and in this Chechen, or do they speak, or do they create the same alphabet or not?
Nobody is creating an alphabet outside the Raś, Prolokella and Zettel and Esh. So because the Silesian ethnopolitical movement is centered in Poland, because this is where in Upper Silesia. This is where most of Silesians live now. The historical territory is mostly in Poland, so you don't have the standardization codification efforts in Śląsk-Cieszyński or in Germany. So the only codified Silesian language that we have so far is the one in the abecadło.
So that's interesting because over time it could either mean that there will be a Polonization of other Silesian movements, or a separation of those where you have a Polish Silesian and a German Silesian and a Czech Silesian.
It's the same in Basque. I mean, the French Basques feel
exactly
really different from the Spanish Basque, even though this border you can't even tell where it is.
And just one, I will jump in with Rushins. These are very interesting. Another very interesting stateless nation, which is not recognized as distinct in Ukraine, recognized as an ethnic minority, Lemkos, in Poland, recognized as a national minority in Slovakia, and they each have different, they work together, they cooperate, but they each codified their own Rusyn languages. And they are now working on, for years, so I think that they don't get together very well on that point, to standardize one Russian language, together with actually Russians from ex-Yugoslavia, which had, yes, they are Russians in ex-Yugoslavia who did codify their dialect language first, actually. So it might be, but at the same time, you don't have so many Silesians in Cieszynski and in Germany for that to occur, I think, for the Silesian case.
There is a Słownik Gwary Cieszynski.
Aha.
It exists. And,
so you see,
so
it's not better
there is some attempted codification of.
But Gwary.
Gwary, but that's unpublished.
That's
whether they believe, whether people proposed it to call it a Gwara or not, but officially it's been published, so they are distinct from Upper Silesian.
So
it's close, but it's not the same.
Not the same. Thank you. So I will look into that. But it's interesting that they put Gwara and not język, which is really, really important and for the Polish ethnopolitical movement.
The other size you had was Gworo. It was not. So language po śląsku maybe is
Gwara.
So
Someone speaks Silesian?
No. But in one of the slides, they were. It was
Gwara.
It was Gwara.
So maybe Gwara is język.
Yeah, Godomy also.
Godomy. Godomy po śląsku. Swój język. So it is different.
Mają gwarę I mają język.
But they wouldn't
I don't know in which
officially
slide, but maybe Gwara is.
If they hadn't used the word Gwara, right, wouldn't publish it.
Of course.
There's one question and another question there.
Similar, I guess a similar question about some of these linguistic fine points. So there was one slide where there were three words, narodowość, naród, and nacja. I hear those as very different words.
And in English, you don't have these.
Well, we have nationality and nation.
Nationality and nation.
Maybe that's not it, but certainly in Polish, maybe nowadays these words are more sliding together. But I think of narodowość and naród as very different words.
Yes.
And yet I saw a lot of sliding back and forth between the narodowość śląska and naród śląski. And so I guess which is it? I know it's both, and this is arguing. But for people engaged in Rash, are they arguing that this is a naród or a narodowość?
Because they are associated, and actually membership is mixed with ZLNS, so this union of people declaring themselves Silesians. They explicitly talk about naród, and they will talk about mniejszość narodowa. So there is now first after the 2005 law on minorities and the Kashubs that were recognized as a group of distinct language, a regional language, the first thing they wanted to do is to let's have the language recognized so we can be put in on the list as a second group, a regional language group. But now what I've seen is that there's no common discourse, but they would like to reopen the law to be put in the category of ethnic minority, but there is also on the transparent mniejszość narodowa. So you have both.
And with this category of ethnic, are we using, I mean, going back, narodowość, that meant ethnicity really, as distinct from narod, which meant nationhood. Is
so that's probably
as sort of a neologism that's coming into yet another category?
That's from what I know. This comes from the Stalin's distinction of nation, naród, nationalist, and ethnic groups, which was nationalist was the distinction in the 1920s was an ethnic group that did not yet acquire the necessary objective criteria to be a nation. That would in the Slavic languages this is the distinctions come. But I agree that there's a confusion, and there's probably a confusion when one translates into English all the subtleties and nuances. One thing is certain, that they do want to be something else than Poles. They do want to be something else than a just language group, and they talk in terms of nationality, which is blurred. Which is blurred.
Too.
And what it is or is not, I'm really not here to say that, and I don't know, and I don't even want to ask myself the question. Well, I don't know what they are, and I stand by the constructivist notion of identity. So it evolves, and the recognition of whichever category is a political question for me, and not a scientific one, really. So and it evolves. So this is all, but the category in which we are put is important because it comes with rights and resources, and this is the political chunk that comes with. And I have to. Oh, sorry, there was yes.
So my background knowledge is very minimal on the issue. So I was trying to piece together the part where the politicians have an incentive to change things post 91 is made very evident. But what to me there seems to be a bit of an issue, at least in my head, trying to make sense of the increased identification of the public, given the lack of residential perpetuation. From what you said, the majority of people did not live in this place prior to 60, 70 years ago. And as a consequence, buying into this memory of an imagination, Renan or Anderson, Benedict Anderson, that's a really good sales job by the political party if they've successfully done that. Or is there an economic or other incentive for these people to be buying?
No. But I'm not sure that maybe I was not clear. It's not the Poles that were resettled in Silesia that self-identify as Silesians. It's only those Silesians that autochthonous. Autochthonous. Okay. So these are the ones. So the Poles or Germans, self-identifying Poles or Germans in Upper Silesia. May be for the autonomy of Silesia as a multicultural region within Europe, but they won't be identifying as Silesian in the census. That's okay. That makes sense. Yes.
So I have a question about Kasubians. So how did they compare in terms of their agenda?
Oh, very different.
Political to the Silesians.
So it's a large question. Very, very differently. First of all, Kashubs always identified as Poles. So they had a double identification. Pole, Kashub, Pole. They spoke the Kashub in home, etc., etc. So since when in the post-communist period, they did want to develop and have resources, to have the media in Kashub, to have Kashub taught in schools as second language, to have folklore, etc. So they needed resources from the state for that. So they did activate the claims for, but the claims were not in terms of we are distinct from Poles. They were never in that terms. We are Poles, but we happen to have our own culture, ethnolect, etc. What is interesting is that what changed a bit, and there was a split within the movement in the Związek Kaszubsko-Pomorski, the Union of Kashubian Pomeranian. There was a split in 2002, or before 2002, when there was the question of the census. Because in the census of 2002, you had to declare one attachment to what is your nationality. And they had a problem because they never identified as being just one, but they had a double identity. So there was a split within this Związek. What should we do? Okay, so let's declare. It was important for them to be numerous because the numbers in the census are associated with existence on the political agenda and claims political and economic for resources, claims for resources. So it's very important to justify why we need to have some resources to develop. See, we have so many Kashubs. But they had a problem, and there was this clear split within this Związek when one camp said we need to declare ourselves as being Kashubs, Kashubian nationality. This is the only way to exist on the agenda. And the others said, but we are not. We are Poles. So the strategy was, let's declare ourselves as being Poles, but then there's the question of what's your mother language. So we are Poles, but we speak Kashub. So that will put us on the agenda because. But there was a split between the strategy, what to do for the 2002 census. So in some twisted way, the census provoked or activated a claim for being a distinct nationality, which was never existent among the Kashub group. 2011 census was perfect, double identification. You could put that, so you have the numbers in the census that reflect that. What is interesting is 2005 law, because they were, what do we do? The only categories we have, the only that were put on the agenda from the beginning is national minority or ethnic minority. But we are not a minority. We are part of the Polish nation. So we are not a minority. We are just distinct. What do we do? And in 2003, Poland signed the European Chart, European Chart for national ethnic groups, minorities, and the regional language group that was ratified afterwards. But that was the possibility for the Kashubs to put, okay, this is what we really want, this category of being a distinct regional language group. So the European norms provided a category that could be imported into the Polish law, and it was actually put on the agenda by the Kashubs after my readings of these numerous pages of transcripts from Commission elaborating the law. So they had very difficult time 2002, they had very difficult time 2005, but then they were recognized, once they are recognized, they receive funds from Europe also to maintain their culture, language, etc. And they receive also funds from Europe to check Polish state on the ways that the minority law is actually implemented for the Kashubs. So they use Europe too. but in a different way. But now the split that was operated in 2002 persists. So from my latest readings, what's going on, there is a fraction of the Kashub organization that is trying to reopen the law and to be put in national minority because it is associated with additional resources and rights. So you have this, but again, it does not change the self-identifications of the Kashub. It changes how the strategies of the elites who adapt to the changing institutions and not. So they try to change what Andreas Wimmer would say. They try to shift the topography of ethnic boundaries, but it doesn't mean that the meaning of the identity by the categories is transformed by that. So I'm only talking about what the elites are doing and how they act. Question. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I was curious about your point when you mentioned that English is increasingly the
Yeah.
language they're using in the communication between themselves.
Social communications, not between themselves.
Okay,
Okay.
so Facebook.
Facebook and stuff like
Right.
that.
So
Same thing that is going on in Quebec.
Yeah.
So I suppose it also has something to do with migration to the UK, I guess, and how young people especially would migrate abroad. I was just curious to what extent Silesian migrants in the UK or other European countries participate in this autonomy movement, and also if you know anything about children of the migrants, which language are they being taught? Is it Silesian? Is it Polish? What identity do they acquire?
I don't know. Well, I to be honest, I really don't know, which is a very interesting question. I don't know what's going on in UK and other diaspora, Silesian diaspora. I don't know. The thing I can just to mention, which is important because it's one of our strategies, having contacts and alliances in Scotia, Catalonia, etc. They arrange jobs for the unemployed Silesians from the region. So they also have the strategy to job migration to help the Silesians because there is large unemployment because of the restructuration of economics, etc. But what happens there, I don't know. So it's an interesting question. Someday I will look at that. Maybe yes. Yeah.
So my question is about the economy. To what extent or in what way is the movement for autonomy fueled by the economic self-perception of Silesians? I mean, I'm from Silesia, and my family there often says that if it weren't for the fact that Silesia has to keep Poland afloat, it would be economically, it would be a much more prosperous region, and they feel
That's
that
Catalonia.
Polish laws
That's
are
the same.
being forced on Silesia, and yeah. So do you know anything about that?
So there are two questions. I think there's how Rush is sponsored. That's no. So it's how the economics play the autonomy. Certainly do. I don't know if there is a correlation, certainly, but I don't know if there is a causal relation. But certainly this Silesian Polish Eldorado, this myth of Polish Eldorado is still there, and this is the A and B Poland, West and East, etc. So I think that certainly plays in, but I did not do the research, so it's intuitive more than proved affirmation that I make here.
I just wanted to ask about the leader of the movement.
Jerzy Gorzelik, yes.
What can you tell us about him? Is he a credible figure?
He very well outspoken. He is, I don't know what exactly he did but his university degree and he knows a lot of the theories on nationalism and nation building, etc. He's really good with that, and he uses in his discourses. He uses his knowledge of scientific research. It is someone, and he's the leader from the. He's there for years. He was not replaced, so he's the one that is really leading the thing. Yes, and he's the one that is the most visible. Also, it's the visible figure of Silesian ethnopolitical movement, certainly.
And the colors, where does the yellow and
oh,
blue?
that's University of Michigan.
Yeah.
Or Ukraine.
Did you?
And so, I mean, is that an invented tradition, or is?
The colors. Where from comes the colors?
They've been there forever, see.
Yeah.
It's not invented, no. As long as, you know, it's been there forever. I mean,
Okay,
if you
so
go back into, you know, at least on the Polish side, those colors were.
Mhm.
were
so
always-
that's too bad. I mean, it's unfortunate marketing for now. You know, if you were to create a new
Branding.
colors, you wouldn't take the Ukrainian colors.
Yeah.
But
No, but it
There's always
goes
so many colours.
back. But in terms of Hobsbawm's
Yeah, exactly.
invented tradition,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Well,
Yeah.
it is. It's a symbol that is supposed to represent and interpret all bunch of history over there. But yes, it's unfortunate that it's so used by Sweden and, and other. Well, I don't know with whom they want to compare, but yes, but it's not something new. That's the colors are not something new for
One thing I've always wondered is why there has never been any conversation about bringing together the lower Silesians.
Yeah.
With, I mean, I know that going back, we have the religious divide, but then again, the religious divide exists between Chechen and and Upper Silesia, and they have a sort of something there.
But
yet-
there's but well, we have a historian here, so maybe it's better to ask him. But it was always since the medieval times there was the divide between Lower and Upper Silesia, and if you the demographic breakdown, if you see who is self-identified Silesian, 4/5 of the population self-identifying with Silesia is in Upper Silesia, not in Lower Silesia, so there is not so much of response over there. And the German minority is more present in Lower Silesia than self-identified Silesians. So, and it comes from history and all the
Germans,
divides
they're
and
all removed.
Sure.
So, and the people,
Exactly.
you know, classic came, and so the inhabitants of
And-
Lower Silesia are not really Silesian.
And then the autonomy was in Upper Silesia. The interwar autonomy was in Upper Silesia because that was the chunk of Silesia that was important.
Yeah. But does that imply that what you just said, 1/5 of the people who self-identify as Silesian are in Lower Silesia? You said
Other
4/5
4/5 in upper something like that, yes. Lower Silesia and scattered
Okay.
probably because for job.
Sure.
Migration, job
Yeah.
patterns, exactly. So yes, they don't. Yes, please.
Here's migration. In terms of migration, is there much or any migration to Silesia for the mining jobs?
Well, to huge amount. No, mining is.
Totally
Mm-mm.
done. Okay. So
Mining is.
So international migrants don't.
Yes.
play
Poland
into
is still an emigration country. When you see the migration statistics, it's really still an immigrant country. So there's no. Well, now the Polish state is trying to repatriate all those immigrants back to Poland, but that's not for tomorrow.
Thank you so
Yes.
much. For
Thank you.
fascinating
Thank you very much.
Thank you.